Morning, folks. I hope you can all hear me. Maybe Brittany can give me a thumbs up emoji to confirm. I'm Alice Brown. I am part of the Boston Harbor Now team. And in just a moment, I'm going to be the other side of the camera. This is one of the few times you're going to see me today. We're so glad that we have people here in real life, people behind me, people in front of me who are about to go on this tour. We were tuned into the monthly Harbor Use Public Forum. I'm joined by a couple other members of our team. So if you know them, Kathy Abbott's here, as well as Kelly Sherman, and you'll probably see their faces on videos soon. Boston Harbor Now convenes these monthly harbor use public forums to hear from developers, public agencies, and other advocates about the work they're taking on around the waterfront. Boston Harbor Now believes strongly that the waterfront belongs to all of us, and that bringing together interactive conversations like this one, we can help ensure better, more thoughtful, and dynamic projects. Today, Boston Harbor Now is taking the ferry, the Seaport ferry. If you haven't been here, this is what it looks like at Lovejoy Wharf. We're going to be joined by a handful of experts. We've got someone from Massport, we've got someone from Bay State Cruises, we've got someone from the Seaport TMA, and someone from the Massachusetts Convention Center Authority. You'll meet all of them. They'll tell you about how this ferry service started, how it's going, and what's next. So like I said, we're here at Lovejoy Wharf. We're going to head to the Seaport and then change vessels to go to East Boston and back. I'm not going to do formal introductions now. I think it'll be easier to do on the boat, but I wanted to let everyone know what's going on. It looks like you all have your cameras off, so maybe you're multitasking, having breakfast, getting some coffee. That's the right thing to do. The ferry is pulling in behind me, and once we're on board, I will turn the camera back on, or I'll be talking to you some more about it. But right now I'm going to turn the camera around the other way really quick, just so you can sort of see what's going on. And then we'll start boarding. So there's Kathy, if you know Kathy, some of our speakers, some of our other guests today. And there's this gangway here that takes folks down to the ferry. So we'll be boarding the ferry momentarily. Morning. And then we're going to head on down the gangway. I would say we're about halfway between high tide and low tide right now, so the gangway is pretty easy to walk on. Sometimes it can be really steep up or down. Today we're on board the Phyllis Wheatley, and we've got two of our speakers. How's it going? Great. I think we're ready to come aboard. So there's an ADA ramp version here, and we are taking the stairs. All right, thanks for bearing with us through boarding. The boat's going to depart momentarily. I got a few questions from the audience. One of them is the boat we're on today is the Phyllis Wheatley. If you don't know who Phyllis Wheatley is, she's a really famous poet. She was brought to the United States as a slave as a young girl, and the Wheatley family purchased her, and then they taught her English, and it turned out she was an accomplished, became an accomplished poet by the age of 13, learned English, became a poet, was very ill in her late teens, and was sent to Europe, to England, because people always thought that boat trips were good for health, something that I sort of agree for mental health, but mystifies me otherwise. Brittany's put a link in the chat for people on Zoom. Phyllis Wheatley goes to England. She gets her book of poems published. She comes back to the United States. They decide to manumit her or give her freedom after that, because you should not be enslaving a famous author. Sadly, the American Revolution breaks out, and that's not a great time to be a free Black woman with an unemployed husband and children, and she actually died at a pretty young age. It's pretty tragic, but she is memorialized here in Boston, not only with this boat, but also if you walk on Commonwealth Avenue, there's a monument to her there as well. Definitely a person to look into. I'm going to turn the camera around and hand the headphones off to our first fabulous speakers from the Massachusetts Convention Center Authority. One of them is very expecting right now, so give her all the grace in the world. So here's Shannon.
Thanks, Alice. So as Alice mentioned, my name is Shannon Smith. I'm the Director of Transportation for the Massachusetts Convention Center Authority. And we, in addition to running the Seaport Ferry, we also work at the Convention Center. So our department handles all the parking and transportation needs for the BCC, the Hines, the Boston Common Garage, and also the Mass Mutual Center in Springfield. So right now, like as Alice mentioned, you're aboard the Phyllis Wheatley. That's one of our 3 boats. There's the Wheatley, the Whittemore, and the Christmas Addicts. We run 2 routes right now for ferry transportation. So those are going on the boat that we're on now, which goes between Lovejoy Wharf at North Station and Fan Pier in the Seaport. And our newer route, which goes from Fan Pier in the Seaport over to Lewis Mall in East Boston. Both of these run on a Monday through Friday schedule every 20 minutes. And that's the service we're happy to be able to provide. It provides the last mile connection between places that you could get to by land, but it would take you a lot longer. So one of the things that we've noticed, so a little bit about how we started doing this. So when we started, probably back in 2015, they came out with the South Boston Waterfront Sustainable Transportation Plan, which looked at the Seaport and it said, well, there's all of these different things going on here. There's more people than there is public transportation. How do we fix this? So there was a collection of city and state agencies, and local stakeholders, private businesses, and everyone got together and said, this is what we need in the short, medium, and long term to fix transportation in the area. We started off with helping out as a convention center with consolidating shuttles. So there's a lot of private businesses in the Seaport, and one of the things they like to do is make sure that their employees get to work. That's their main goal. So they were running buses, individual companies would run a bus to North Station. Problem with that is if every company has a bus, there's a lot of traffic congestion and there's not a good frequency of service. So everybody's running one bus that runs maybe every hour. If it doesn't happen to work with your train, you're probably not waiting to take it. So what we did is we said, all right, well, we run buses for hotel shuttles at the convention center. We can probably take this and group you all together and make it run much more efficiently. So we took all of the different shuttle routes, we consolidated them into a couple stops for a few of the local businesses, and we were able to save them time and money by putting them on one route, having the route go more frequently so more people could take it, which cut way back on traffic. And in most cases, it saved the money. And if it didn't save the money, it greatly improved their service. So the next step with that was once Lovejoy Wharf was completed, we were able to say, you know what, the buses work, but a ferry would be better. And that was something that everyone had agreed on previously. We as a convention center had never run ferries before, but we said, well, we run transportation, how different could it be? We were lucky enough to partner with Mike Glassfeld, who's also here from Bay State Cruises. So he is our boat operator. So he knows all of the things about ferry boats that we as a convention center did not know. So he helped us find and rent these lovely boats before we were able to purchase them and manage the service to make sure we're going from dock to dock on a regular schedule. We found that people really like the service simply because there's no traffic on the water. So when we say it's 20 minutes, it's 20, it's not 40. If we're lucky, it's a few minutes shorter. It really just depends on how many people are getting on and off. So that was pretty successful with the companies that we've been as participants, excuse me. And so we were able to open it up. And with that, because of the size of the boats, we're able to open it up to public transportation. So the way this works from our end as a public-private partnership is the companies of the Seaport pay for the North Station route completely. Anyone buying public tickets, that gets reimbursed to them because they're paying a lot for this service. So we're helping them out by trying to promote it to the public, help the public out by giving them a reliable way to get to work. And so it's our hope that we can continue to grow the services. East Boston right now is still, we're entering year 2 of a pilot. It's still a pilot simply because post-COVID, we're not sure what normal is to be expected. We can talk about that more when we get on the boat to East Boston. So any questions?
What is the capacity of your boats?
So what is the capacity of the boats? So the capacity of the boats is 97 people seated, but we can take up to 120 people on the boat with standees based on the amount of life jackets we have. So for every 20 minutes, it's fairly high capacity. We haven't really run into any issues yet.
What's the speed limit?
So I don't know what the official speed limit is. I will say that from North Station to the Fan Pier, we're in a no wake zone. So the boat does go a little bit slower here than it would from East Boston. And then if we eventually get to expand down to Pier 10, the no wake zone goes away for part of the trip. So there is a portion where we can definitely increase our speed. So. Yes. So how do we advertise to the public? So that is a great question and something that we're working harder on. So right now you can follow us on, we have a website, so it's seaportferry.com. And we have an Instagram and a Twitter, which are both Seaport Ferry. So Molly and Erin kind of manage our social media presence. So they're out there looking to do all of that, and interact with people. Fun fact, if you like dogs on boats, we tend to see a lot of those. And that tends to be where a lot of our followers come from, is people looking for cute dogs on boats. You know, things you don't expect, but it does seem to be work out that way. And so what we're working on next is we try to engage more in public things. So like meetings like this, we work with Pat Sullivan and his team. Sometimes we attend the bike weeks on Wednesdays. And we're looking to probably launch a few more flyer-based campaigns. So some of the local residences, we've dropped off flyers before. So we're always looking for new ways to interact, but for right now, it's kind of more of an organic growth. So we actually just restructured our departments to have people dedicated specifically. So that's with Erin and Molly and also Brad, to dedicated to our commuter services as opposed to our convention services, to help us expand this. So that was very new. I think Brad just got moved over to this section. Was it 2 weeks ago? I think it was 2 weeks ago. Yeah. So we're kind of on the new end of having more of a dedicated staff specifically for our outside services. So that's something we're very excited about.
Can you talk about how ridership has changed pandemic-wise for increase in general?
Sure. So pre-pandemic, we were averaging about 800 people a day on the North Station service. And that was basically, seemed to be because the vast majority of the offices that we served were having people come into the office Monday through Friday, working on your basic 9 to 5 schedule. Since the pandemic, there's still a lot of return to normal. A few of the companies haven't required any return to the office, so the ridership is significantly lower at the moment. What we've noticed is that we tend to get probably a little north of 200 people a day, so our numbers are down, unfortunately. They tend to be strongest on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. No surprise to anybody when given the choice of when you want to work from home. Most people pick Mondays and Fridays. But what's interesting and what we've noticed is that the public ridership seems to be very consistent. So it's not as big as the corporate ridership, but especially like on East Boston, Fridays on East Boston, I think just because of the restaurant access, tends to be higher than on your average weekday. So it is different depending on kind of who's using the service and what they're using it for. So we've noticed a lot of people, like in the winter, you'll know there's no one really coming into Fan Pier at night, typically. In the summer, with the restaurants and people going down to the pavilion to see a concert, you tend to see the afternoon people commuting into Fan Pier. East Boston, again, because of the restaurants, people are going both ways pretty much at all times of day in the afternoon. There's no real direction to that commute. Whereas with the North Station, there is more of a direction of they come into the Seaport in the morning and they leave the Seaport in the afternoon.
What time do you run till?
We run until our last trip is at 6:40 in the evening. So
So how do you go to the restaurants to get back?
Uber. Yeah, so what we've noticed is there's more, but right now we're at the point where without somebody funding that service, there's not enough more to justify the cost of extending the hours. So that's something we do track the trends of, because I think in the future it's something we'd like to see more of, just because it is such a good way to travel around the city. But 5 people coming back from dinner on a boat that holds 120 is not justifying the costs, unfortunately. So.
And so the mascot, we can't stop.
Mhm.
This was very so. Yeah, that I know of at this point. Are there any conversations that he walking that's example of taking that so kind of help out?
So we've offered to MassDOT that we could potentially run if they asked us to. They have not asked us to run the service as of yet. So that's something we're waiting. It's kind of the ball's in their court on that one to decide how they'd like to mitigate traffic. Yes. So, which we're not typically running, although I believe next year the Sumner Tunnel closure becomes a weekday shutdown, and I would anticipate that our services will be much busier because of that. So. Sure. So we were talking about the Sumner Tunnel closure. So right now there's a weekend closure on the Sumner Tunnel. We have not been asked to run a mitigation service. We don't typically run on weekends, so that is something that we're open to if that was something that MassDOT would like us to participate in. But as of right now, we have not been involved in that process. So the pricing, so right now the tickets are $5 per person per ride. And then children under 12 are free with an adult. And some of the other popular questions we tend to get is, yes, you can bring your dog on board as long as they are leashed and well behaved. We do have space for baby strollers. It's completely wheelchair accessible. And we have randomly had people bring their robots that carry their grocery bags with them. So those are allowed as well. Yes, bicycles are allowed. So there is a space in the back that we can put those. So unless we have all 120 people on one boat, we should have space for all of those fun things. Yes. So I think there'd be some new sponsors. So the only one I think that really overlaps between Fan Pier and Pier 10 is Vertex, has space in both. And so they've been a great proponent of the service. And then there's some other businesses down there that we've discussed with them that this is something that they would look to add, simply because there isn't really another direct connection that goes that far down in the Seaport. So ideally, if we were to expand to Pier 10, the service would go from Lovejoy to Fan Pier out to Pier 10 and back. We would probably need to add a boat to keep it on a 20-minute service.
Running to Pier 10, I mean, the dock's going in, so running up there. Is MassDOT or?
No, so right now, and Pat can probably speak more to this because he's helping them work on the project to get the grant, to get the dock put in. If we were to expand the service, it would continue to be run by the convention center down to Pier 10 for the service from North Station for the companies that would run it privately. If there's a separate service going down there, that has nothing to do with us. I don't know anything about that, but our plan would be that if the businesses would like us to expand the service, we're happy to do so. All right, I will hand the microphone back over to Alice.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Shannon. For those of you who are following along hybrid, I'm gonna pull some things from the chat so that the people on the boat have heard them. Give me 1 second. So we've answered most of the questions. Suzanne Giel-Moyden says there's currently a federal notice of federal, I'm not gonna get this right, it's a NOFO for ferry grants available. So Susan, I can follow up with you on that. Tom Reddy thinks that there's sort of an ideal harbor ferries branding that would let people know where all the harbor ferries go, and we can sort of explore that more as well. So I'm going to close the chat. I'm going to turn off the volume, but sort of show you what things look like as we get off the ferry here. We're going to transfer to the East Boston Ferry, and then you're going to hear from a few more folks. Thanks. I think we're back, and I'm going to turn it back over to Mike Glassfeld. Here's everyone who's here today. Everyone can wave hi. Hi. And Mike's gonna talk a little bit about the vessels before we board and learn more about how the Lewis Mall ferry came to be. And then on our trip back, we're gonna hear from Pat a little bit more about that mystery Pier 10 service and Pier 10, et cetera. So here's Mike.
Hi, I'm Mike. I'm the boat guy. So the question is, how did we come to select these vessels? And there were three key reasons to choose them. The primary one was the limitation of the bridge height over at Washington Street. It was fairly low for commercial boats. It was 21 feet, which means 19 feet, because we have to take into consideration the neap tides of the season. So to find a capable vessel, meaning that it can carry people at 19 and a half feet, it was a challenge. And the other thing we wanted, because it was such a short run, we knew that we could spend as much time loading and offloading as we would be on the water. And so you have to go to bow loading vessels. New York is really the capital of bow loading vessels. So we started there, and we found these boats with their low height. We actually lowered them further. When they came to us, they were 22 feet tall. We lowered masts, repositioned radars, electronics, antenna, and now they're 19 and a half foot. So that was number one. But the bow loading is key, especially on this East Boston that we're about to perform. It's about a 6-minute run. So to be able to get the people on and off quickly via the bow, instead of tying up side two, meaning you put a rope over, I'm saying rope because that's what lands people say, we say lines, but to put 4 lines over, come ahead on a spring line, it takes a while. So to go bow loading in with no lines at all really speeds things up. The third reason we chose these vessels is they're triple screwed, meaning they have 3 engines. So we're always concerned with a commuter boat service to have reliability. We can't miss a run. We cannot miss a run. And I'm happy to say, after thousands and thousands of runs, I think we've only missed one. And the triple engine gives us that system redundancy, so that if we are having an issue with one engine, we can still perform on 2. In fact, this run is so undemanding, we could perform with about 1/5 the horsepower that we have. So speaking of which, as we talk about expanding out to Pier 10, these are in fact high-speed ferries. I heard a question asked earlier about what's the speed limit in the harbor. It is wake limited, not speed limited, but that's typically 5 knots on the inner harbor and 8 knots out to the number 1 buoy. And then you can go great guns, and great guns on these boats is 28 knots. So it's a unique vessel that it can accomplish the Pier 10 run. It can accomplish the inner harbor run. The other benefit it has is, by being so highly powered, we have less weather days. The MBTA calls their service at roughly 35 or 40 knots. We have yet to find our limit. We've been out in 50 knots of wind and have not canceled service. So it's a dynamite boat for the service, and we're probably going to be adding a 4th one here in a little while as well.
Thanks, Mike. We've got people coming down, so we're going to split up and let people go off. To the earlier reference to social media being super popular, we do have a dog on the ferry this morning, and all sorts of folks taking the service from East Boston today. So we're going to be boarding this boat. This boat is the Crispus Attucks. For those of you following along at home and learning about the namesakes of these boats, Crispus Attucks was the first person killed in the Boston Massacre. He was the son of an indigenous person and an enslaved person. So he is both Black and Native American. And you can learn more about him on, we're gonna get right on the board. Brittany put a link in the chat. You can learn more about him with a marker at the end of Long Wharf about the middle passage that brought enslaved people to the United States. So I encourage you to check that out if you want to learn more in real time. So we're boarding this boat. I'm going to go back on mute, and then we'll be handing the camera over.
Nui Huang with Massport. I'm the Deputy Director of Capital Programs. So we manage design and construction for Massport. I had the pleasure of working on the Lewis Mall Ferry Terminal 2 years ago. So that was a partnership, one of the best partnership I ever had a chance to work with. So with MassDOT, with MBTA, with the Convention Center, with Massport and the city. You bring all that agencies in, usually it's trouble, but it turned out to be one of the most wonderful projects. So we were asked, Massport was asked to manage the design and construction of the new, not new now, but Lewis Mall Ferry Terminal. And we were asked to complete everything within 9 months, which was a challenge. So what we did was we call phase 1 and phase 2. The phase 1 over there, we were able to do it in 9 months because we were able to borrow the float from the MBTA. They had a couple float that was, not in great conditions, but they were sitting, in the yard I believe, Billerica. So we actually went and picked up the float in Billerica, and they were rusting. They were in pretty bad shape. They were taking on water. So one of the first activity that we did was to make sure that the float were watertight. So that was done off-site. The other thing that we did, we had to procure the gangway, ADA compliance gangway. So that procurement was done out of Florida. Now we started the permitting just before the pandemic. So we were able to get all the permits in place, the Conservation Commission, they would DEP and so on and so forth. And we did the design pretty much within a month and a half, which was pretty tight schedule. We went in and we did the hydro survey, underwater survey of the area. We did debris sweep, make sure there's no, abandoned car underneath the water, what have you. And we did the survey of, there's an MBTA tunnel underneath there. So we had to survey that to make sure that the float is designed away from the MBTA tunnel, because we have to drive piles for the facility. So it was a lot of engineering that was done within a month and a half timeline. And then at the same time, we designed the gangway and we had that fabricated while the design continued for the rest of the facility. So that was, I would say, at the end of 2019, and then 2020 March timeframe, with the COVID, everything got shut down, and it's turned out the gangway facility was being fabricated in one of the county in Florida, and that was the only county that was completely shut down. So all the facility, everybody had to, close the shop. So we got the notice that, they don't know when they're going to reopen, and we're like, shoot, everything we were trying to do, we were hoping to finish by June of 2020. So make the long story short, because of that shutdown, we were not able to complete it until the fall of 2020, about 3 months behind schedule because of the pandemic. But we were able to finish that the fall, and it's working beautifully. You're going to get to see it. Mike talked earlier about the design of the terminal. One of the things that we did initially, we were designing it for side loading vessels. And the bow loading vessel was supposed to be part of phase 2. But then we sat down with the convention center. We were doing an inventory of all the boats in and around the harbor. And it's, with the convention center, they purchased, or they were planning to purchase a bow loading vessel. So we end up redesigning, again, on short notice, so that there's a fender for the bow loading. So we were able to do that, and able to, the first day that was open, the convention center brought the boat over, and it worked out really well. So it's a great amenity to the community. I actually was looking at how many people from East Boston just came off when we were, getting on, and I'm just pleasantly surprised to see that many people actually using the service. So it's a good story. So just the last thing, what we see there, what we call phase 1. We do have a phase 2 in the works, or in the plan. Phase 2 would raise the pier for resiliency. So right now, it's tied to the existing pier elevation. In the future, the plan, working with the city, what have you, is to raise it to elevation 117, which is 100 years elevations, flood elevations. So that will raise the pier, have to redrive the piles, reinstall the gangway, so that's ADA compliance. So there's work that needs to be done, and the eventual plan is to actually give it back to the state. But for phase 2, the plan is to procure a permanent new float for that facility. So my hope is that project will be happening so that become a permanent facility, ADA compliant, designed for resiliency, and additional public amenities. Lighting, kiosks, a couple other signage is key. Any questions?
Hi, I'm Erin with the Convention Center. So as Shannon had mentioned earlier, we do run a route from East Boston. It goes into Fan Pier over in the same location that our North Station service goes. The frequency is every 20 minutes, similar to the other service. They kind of run in between so the boats don't delay one another at all. The public is able to use the service for $5 one way, $10 round trip. As Shannon mentioned, right now, the convention center does subsidize this service, but we're hoping by getting a little bit more promotion to the public in the coming months, we've added a few new people to our team to kind of help with this. The outreach to kind of the community in general will increase the ridership. On another note too, we're kind of pulling in here, so I'll be a little quick. If anybody is interested in kind of taking a ride in general on it, we are having free tickets for Alice that we're going to give to you guys. So to hold on to, you can use in either service. So Brad will be handing them out, and any of the remainders I'll give to Alice and she can get them to you guys. So cool. Yeah, no problem.
Mike, do we have time to pop off and get back on? So we're gonna hop off the boat just really quickly so we can see this great new dock that you just heard about, and then we'll be back on to go back and hear from Pat. Yep.
The other big selling points here is we're extremely close to the Maverick T stop. So if you're looking to join the Blue Line, this is a great place to do it.
You didn't hear that? The blue line is directly down the street. It's a 2-minute walk so people can transfer and get to the Seaport faster that way. I think we're gonna need to get back on the boat so Mike can pull away on time.
Hi, good morning, everyone. What a beautiful morning to be on a boat on Boston Harbor, right? My name is Pat Sullivan. I'm the executive director of the Seaport TMA. We work with the business community in the Seaport on solving transportation problems. We work with our partners at the City of Boston, Massport, MassDOT, on planning new transportation improvements. And we work very closely with our colleagues at the Convention Center to help plan, promote, and oversee water ferry service on Boston Harbor. You heard from Shannon and Erin earlier about the success of the Seaport North Station ferry, and the success of that ferry, the identified challenge of expanding transit access to the Flynn Marine Park led us to this effort that's ongoing right now to construct a dock at Pier 10 to expand water ferry service to Pier 10 in the Flynn Marine Park. Back in early 2020, working with the Convention Center, we convened a group of property owners and employers in the Marine Park, and we started talking about the growth that's happening there. Right around Pier 10 or on the end of Dry Dock Ave, there's about 2.5 million square feet of maritime, office, and light industrial space that's within about half-mile walk of the dock. And the Flynn Marine Park master plan actually forecasts about an additional 4 million square feet of development in the Marine Park. So transit access to the park is really critical. So with that in mind, we identified Pier 10 as a really logical place to have a dock constructed. We actually worked with the convention center on a feasibility study, just looking at, does that location make sense? How do we maintain the facility? And what can we expect for ridership given time to move on this project. So then we engaged with the city of Boston, who actually owns the green space at the end of Pier 10. And the city was very receptive, but the city had no plans at that time to really do anything with Pier 10. So we're proud that we were able to put this on their radar. And if you look at the Flynn Marine Park master plan that was recently updated right now, Pier 10 figures heavily as a transportation, again, own the property of Pier 10, to craft the grant proposal for the Federal Transit Administration's Passenger Waterways Ferry Program, which is open right now. It's about $33 million this year to fund infrastructure projects just like this. And what we hope to do is build a dock at the end of Pier 10, as well as make some improvements to the pier itself. We also are the city's looking to construct a passenger waiting area there as well. So we're going to be submitting that grant later this fall. And while that's all been happening, this TMA actually got funding from employers in the marine park and property owners in the marine park to hire a marine engineering firm to develop a design for the dock, to do a hydrographic survey. We sent divers down to look at the seafloor to make sure that conditions were ripe for building a new floating dock there. And we're also working through the permitting right now. So essentially, we're getting this project shovel ready so that once this grant funding comes through, we can deliver that to the city, and the city can go right ahead with bidding and get a contractor to build the dock. So our fingers are crossed that by the end of 2022, we'll have that funding in place, and pretty quickly in 2023, the city can start on construction. And then working with the convention center, working with Bay State Cruise Company, we'll be able to expand water transportation down to that end of the neighborhood and make that important connection. Any questions? Yes. Is there any thinking around expanding water transportation to the waterfront between Fan Pier and Pier 10? Over at Commonwealth Pier, formerly, oh, I'm sorry. That's a little bit outside of my expertise relative to what's going on in the Seaport. I'm sure Alice and the team at Boston Harbor now might have an answer for that. I'm sorry. Okay. Any other questions? Oh, yes, yes. Between Fan Pier and Pier 10, over at Commonwealth Pier, the World Trade Center, Pembroke Real Estate is redeveloping the pier, and they are building new water transportation facilities on the east and west apron of the dock there. And so there'll be new facilities for water transportation. I don't know if there are any immediate plans to launch a service, but the infrastructure will be in place. So hopefully in the next couple of years, there'll be that additional connection as well. Oh, sorry, yes. The question is, how long will it take to get to Pier 10? So I believe it's going to be somewhere between 18 and 20 minutes, that ride. It's a little bit longer than the 14 minutes to get to Fan Pier.
The idea is that you'd stop at Fan Pier first, dock, and then it would go out to Pier 10. So the good thing is once you leave Fan Pier to go to Pier 10, we're outside of the wake zone, so the boat will go a lot faster. And I know we've timed it occasionally with Mike, but I think the only thing we haven't done is because there's not a dock there currently, we haven't timed it with pulling in, docking the boat, and letting people off. So that's something that we'll have to work on once the dock is there. But the idea is that to run that service, we'd have 3 boats and something would depart each dock every 20 minutes. So we'd have a circular route going on there. So it shouldn't be too much longer.
And just to add to that, the time it would take on, let's say, a shuttle bus to go from North Station to that end of the marine park, I think in most cases would certainly be beyond 20 minutes. So water transportation would be faster, and of course, there's no traffic on the water, as Shannon mentioned earlier, so a much more reliable ride. Yes. Yes, the question was about funding for Pier 10. So we're submitting, in the next few weeks, we'll be submitting a grant to the feds, the FTA, as part of the passenger waterways ferry program. And so there's, again, about $33 million there. What's great is that this year they've expanded the water transportation competitive grant funding as part of the bipartisan infrastructure bill. So there are millions of new dollars for EV infrastructure and low emission boat procurement. So that actually makes the grant we're applying for less competitive, because people trying to buy boats have their own pool of grant funding. And hopefully we'll be able to tap into this for infrastructure funding.
One last question.
Yes.
Is the expectation that the city owns Pier
100%.
10?
Yes. The question is, will the city own Pier 10? And yes, it will be a city-owned asset. We're just helping deliver the project, working with the city. Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Alice, we can't hear you.
Oh. Thank you, Tom. Okay, let me start that over again slightly. We're going to take one more boat back to North Station. If you need to go to North Station, or people who are here are going to stay in the Seaport, we are going to continue our all virtual harbor use forums in the fall. So starting in September, they'll be back. You can find out about using Boston Harbor Now's social media. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and I've heard we're on LinkedIn too. And you can also get our e-news. You can visit bostonharbornow.org to sign up for that. So we do hope that you'll continue to stay involved in conversations. We talk about water transportation, we talk about new parks, we talk about new developments, we talk about people who are advocating for other parts of the harbor. And we do hope that all of you stay involved and engaged in the work. So I'm going to turn off the Zoom version. Brittany can stay on for a couple of minutes to answer questions in the chat. I did note that we are getting some free tickets, and if you were not able to join us in person today but want to try it in the future, you can just shoot me an email. You should have that, abrown@bostonharbornow.org. Thanks so much to everyone online.